This week on Quadriga, refugee crisis. Do we care enough? They're fleeing persecution, war and poverty in the hope of a safer and better life in Europe. Hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers have made the trek to Germany since the beginning of the year. Many Germans are eager to help them. But there's also been opposition and even racist attacks. Can Europe find a worthy answer to the humanitarian crisis, or will it isolate itself still further? Coming to you from Berlin, Quadriga, the international debate. Your host this week, Peter Craven.
Yes, hello, and a very warm welcome to this latest edition of Quadriga, coming to you from the German capital, Berlin. And our topic today is the refugee crisis, and the question we are asking is, do we care enough? And to discuss that question, I'm joined here in the studio by three seasoned observers and commentators, and I'd like to introduce them to you now, beginning with Katarzyna Stoklosa, who is an expert on Central and Eastern Europe and currently an associate professor in the Department of Border Region Studies at the University of Southern Denmark. Now, Katarzyna says Germany has to offer migrants a real integration programme that would help the newcomers and allow German society to profit from what they have to offer. Now, we're also joined today by Christoph von Marschall. He is the diplomatic correspondent for the Berlin daily Der Tagesspiegel. In his opinion, there are desirable and undesirable asylum seekers. People from the Balkans, he says, have no right to asylum, and they don't have the kind of professional skills that Germany needs. They should therefore be sent home. And a familiar face here on Quadriga is Erik Kirschbaum, born in New York. He's a reporter who has, down the years, written for numerous dailies and magazines in the US. He is currently with the Reuters news agency here in Berlin, has been for many years. And he says beyond the ugly headlines, Germans have been opening their hearts and homes to refugees. A positive note there from Erik. But I would like to begin with Christoph von Marschall, if I might. Because earlier this week, one of Germany's leading journalists said the following, or wrote the following, and I'm quoting. He said, the refugee crisis isn't just a problem for the summer of 2015. He said it's a problem for the 21st century. And he went on to say that in the future, the 21st century will be judged according to how it treated the refugees. Do you agree with that assessment?
Not totally. Of course, I can't say that we will not come to such a situation, but recent decades have shown that we have times when we got more refugees and times when there are less. For example, in the 90s, we had already, when we had the Bosnian War, we had 500,000 refugees in Germany. Then it went down to 120,000, 200,000. At the beginning of this year, we thought it's 250,000. In the middle of the year, we thought it might be 500,000. Now we think it will be 800,000 or even 1 million.
At least,
there you can see that dynamics are changing. And it can go down again if we take the right precautions and send the right signals.
We're certainly talking about huge numbers. I mean, the UNHCR has said that there are more refugees on the move in the world now than any other time in recorded history. And over half of them are children, so great cause for concern. And our question today is, do we care enough? What's your answer to that question initially?
Generally, we care enough, yes, but we do the wrong things, I think. And one of the questions, from my point of view, is, do we use all the private willingness to help and all the private abilities to integrate people, or do we think as big government Democrats, which think, well, it's all the responsibility of the governments? And I think this is the wrong approach. It's the wrong perception and the wrong approach.
Mm-hmm. Katarzyna Stoklosa, the same question, you know, a huge refugee crisis, staggering numbers of people on the move, staggering numbers of people coming to Europe and to Germany. Do people here in Germany, do people in Europe care enough?
I'm totally agree with you. I think Germany, Europe not so much, but Germany and German society do a lot in order to help refugees. And when we compare the help, German help, with international help, European help, we have to say it's enormous help on the one hand. On the other hand, Germany doesn't recognize a difference between refugees. And sure, we need point system, a system like in Canada, it would be excellent in order to choose the best refugees and the best people the society, the German society needs. And perhaps we would say it's egoistic, but on the other hand, it would be good for both sides, for the German society and for people who arrive here. Because if we concentrate on the whole refugees, if we concentrate on all people coming here and try to help everybody, at the end, the result not be so excellent, because it's not possible to help the whole society. But if we, from the beginning, take a decision and decide, OK, with these people, we would like to deal more, to help more, in order to get something from them, in the future, both sides would profit. So in order to answer your question, I think Germany does enough, but it's not enough strategic.
What do you make of that, Erik? I mean, it sounds to me like cherry-picking the best people from societies that are already struggling economically and bringing the best people to Germany, integrating them here and leaving those societies bereft of some of their, very highly skilled men and women.
I mean, it's a huge enrichment for Germany that people are coming to Germany. Germany has a shrinking population. They desperately need more people. There's some very talented people coming to Germany all the time. Absolutely, he's right. The asylum laws in Germany are generous and being abused by certain people. Part of the reason is because there's no real process for immigration to Germany, are very limited. But I mean, you're right at the beginning. This is a huge problem. It's going to be a huge problem for a long, long time. Politicians in Germany and the rest of the EU are just gradually waking up to it, dragging their feet. I think they're afraid to send signals that might encourage more people to come. But with climate change looming, refugees are going to be coming for all kinds of reasons for decades to come. And this is the beginning of it. This is something people have been predicting for a long time. Maybe it's coming more quickly and more force than anybody thought, but it's a huge problem. It's going to be a problem. And there's no real answers. Nobody seems to come up with an answer or any leadership.
It's interesting that you talk about politicians dragging their heels, as you put it, because Angela Merkel was commenting on the magnitude of the crisis earlier this week, and she said that it's going to be a graver crisis, a bigger challenge for our societies than the Greek debt crisis, for example. But nevertheless, you will have noted, in the way that many people have here in Germany, people have been complaining about this, that Angela Merkel hasn't so far visited one centre for asylum seekers to show her presence there. How grave is that omission?
Yeah, I mean, there is criticism of her for that. She hasn't really made any clear comments. We welcome the refugees. She had a chance with a young 8-year-old girl, a refugee, a few months ago, that she kind of botched that one. She didn't really show compassion. A lot of Germans in the social media got upset that she saw this girl crying and couldn't really find a suitable answer, and it went viral. I mean, during this refugee crisis, I think the best of Germany has been there and the worst of Germany. In the spring, when a lot of refugees were coming and a lot of the refugee centers were being burned, it was an amazing number of refugee centers be burning. A lot of foreign journalists like myself were writing about those stories. That was sort of the ugly Germany that we thought had been put behind us 20 years ago when that was happening. But then all of a sudden, this summer, there's been this huge outpouring of just ordinary Germans going out of their way to help refugees, putting them in shelters, bringing them food, bringing them water. Til Schweiger, this actor, helped organize toys, and it's an amazing story. I mean, I think as a foreign journalist, it's nice to see these good Germans coming out of the woodwork and showing what Germany can do.
OK. Katarzyna, just wait a second, because Erik has given me the perfect intro to some pictures we're going to see, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss this, the two sides of Germany. Let's have a look, first of all.
This is the ugly face of Germany. These people feel threatened, and they hate anything foreign. They're a small minority, but they're noisy, ready to attack defenseless people, armed with clubs or lighters. Since the beginning of the year, there have been over 200 attacks on refugee shelters, more than in all of 2014. And this is the nice face of Germany, people who want to help those in need. Their tools, friendliness and care packages. They're a sizable and vocal minority, but they don't feature much in the media. No European country has more asylum seekers than Germany. But is the silent majority willing to integrate so many refugees?
Katarzyna, you were hoping to come in and I cut you off.
No problem, thanks. A short comment here. Till Schweiger, yes, it's, in my opinion, too much propaganda and doesn't help us. But
let me just clarify for the people at home. Till Schweiger is the Brad Pitt of German movie acting. I think it's fair to say that. You know, he's not internationally that well known, but in Germany he's a really big deal, and he's been commenting on the refugee crisis
again and again.
And he's been a bit of a lightning rod for it, though, too. He's one of the few German celebrities who's come out of the woodwork, and he's been bashed in social media just because he wants to show, hey, we need to show compassion with these people. They're struggling, and let's help them. And Germans are very good at that. Through their history since World War II, millions have come to Germany, and they've been welcomed.
But why are Germans so good at that? I mean, why are there other countries in Europe that are saying, keep the migrants, keep the immigrants out? That's what they're asking of their politicians. And the Germans, I mean, there's one poll that suggests that 25% of all Germans have actually considered taking in a refugee or offering accommodation to a refugee. How do you explain that?
Well, it's our perception of our history. I mean, we have been guilty of expelling people, of murdering hundreds, thousands, millions of people, and now we try to learn our part of the lessons of history and react in a different way. That's one thing. But of course, it comes to an end. The moment, for example, now we have still school holidays. Yeah. Latest at the beginning of September, school children will come to their schools and they can't do gymnastics, sports, because there are refugees living there in the schools. This will become a practical problem. The first moment when a community will tell you, well, we have to close down the swimming pool or something else because we just don't have the money, because the money is going to refugees, then you will have a practical problem. And therefore, I think we should change our thinking. We should be much more harsher to people who have not a legal right to come here, who are just saying, well, we need political asylum, but in reality, they are looking for a better economic situation, which is not bad. I mean, they have my full understanding. Everybody would do that. But it just means they can't take advantage of the system, and we should send them home very quickly to send a signal to others, don't come here if that is your motivation. We should be much more comforting and better in dealing with people who are coming from war regions like Syria, like Afghanistan, like Iraq. And for those people, we really have to find a better solution in Europe. And there we have to be much more practical. We don't have to think in this administrative ways that, well, that's the responsibility of the government, and there you need just quotas, how much people a country has to take. Syrian refugees are much better off in Great Britain if they have relatives there. And it might be that people from Africa, when it's Francophone Africa, they should go to France because they might have people from their region over there. And we Germans should take in those who have already relatives or people from the same region or people from religious groups. I mean, a lot of people are Christians.
If Germany takes in only half of the 800,000 refugees who are coming to Germany this year, that's the latest figure, takes in only half, that's 400,000 people. Yeah. Surely next year, according to your theory, 400,000 more will come because they've got relatives already here, they've got communities here.
I mean, there Erik has a fair point. We have to find a better way how to say, well, we need an organized system of immigration. That is a question where we should deal in order to meet our own interests, like also Katarzyna said. Then we need a point system. If these are people who are coming from war regions, that is a humanitarian question. And there we shouldn't ask, is that good for us or not? These are people who are fleeing from war and they need a shelter. That's a totally different question. But these are not the big numbers. The refugees from the war regions, this is not the big number. This is a number which is on a similar level, and that might be 1/4 of the whole number.
German politicians have been talking for decades about allowing immigration. They said this was a country of no immigrants, and it's one of the biggest countries of immigrations in the world, and they just don't get their act together. They talk about it, but the reason is this bottleneck of economic refugees coming to Germany. There's just no mechanism for Germans to legally come here, for foreigners to legally come here and work here. That's the problem.
Maybe that is something we will see happening in the future, yeah? But possibly not with Angela Merkel. and her Conservatives, they've always been opposed to Germany becoming a country of immigration, although that is what it has become in recent years.
Exactly.
But not,
Well, yes and no. I mean, we have a lot of legal immigration through the enlargement of the European Union. I mean, most of the migrants from the new EU members of Central Eastern Europe are coming to Germany. Of course, a lot came also to Great Britain because they opened the labour market earlier than others. But since Germany is the biggest country in the EU and also with the most powerful economy, a lot of those are coming here. But we are also asking people from India, if they are IT specialists, to come and to our misfortune, they are not coming in masses. We would be happy if they would come, but they are not coming in.
Katarzyna, these two guys are talking about controlled immigration in some shape or form. Either, you know, you mentioned it as well, a point system, or some people, yes, there's the desirable and less desirable immigrants. Germany, as Erik already mentioned, has got a massive demographic problem. It's an ageing society. It has one of the lowest birth rates in the world and has for many years. Now, the mayor of one German city, a man called Oliver Jung, he's the mayor of the central city of Goslar, which has a declining population. He has said, as regards refugees, let them all come. We'll take them all. Is he getting it right?
I don't think it would be the right solution. Let come all refugees.
He has a city which has 4,000 people fewer each year.
Yes, but we have to be careful with those pictures of people who welcome refugees and immigrants. It depends which region is it, and it depends very, very much on numbers, how many refugees. I have done a small research, compared the situation in German small cities and Danish small cities. And in German small cities, 400 inhabitants and 150 refugees. And in most cases, these refugees weren't welcome. And people opposed and people voted against and didn't help, as we saw in these pictures. It was the opposite picture. And now in Danish small cities, 150 inhabitants, towns, and 20 refugees, all of them were welcomed and everybody helped. Why? Because of the small numbers. So in that moment, people were important and were recognized as people, not the numbers. But when so many refugees arrive, they're only numbers and not people. So it's difficult to feel together with others if we see so many. And for this reason, I think it's important to control the numbers of refugees and regions in that they arrive, because if wrong decisions have been taken, can be problematic for both sides.
OK. The one thing we do know from the discussion so far is that the number of refugees coming to Germany is rising rapidly and might reach the figure we've talked about, 800,000 this year. That makes Germany the country in the EU that has taken in the most refugees, at least in absolute terms. Sweden has also, in proportional terms, taken actually more people in than Germany. But those two countries are bearing the bulk of the burden, and the United Nations has warned that is unfair. And as we see now, there are a number of countries around Europe that are doing everything they possibly can to quite simply keep people out.
If you're looking to invest in fences, now would be a good time. Europe is walling itself up for fear of refugees. The Iron Curtain fell here in 1989. Now Hungary is rebuilding its border fence. Britain has effectively sealed off the Channel Tunnel. So would-be immigrants are stranded near the French port of Calais, living in a makeshift camp known as the Jungle. Local authorities tolerate it, but aid organizations say it's a humanitarian disaster. And do fences really solve the problem anyway? Even in the Spanish enclave of Melilla in northern Africa, migrants have breached the 6-meter-high barriers. Europe seems to be counting more on isolation and deterrence than giving aid. Is Fortress Europe a betrayal of European values?
That's the question, Katarzyna. Is Europe betraying its values? Are we now going to, all European countries, start building fences, barriers and walls internally and externally?
It's really terrible. And fences, by wires, as we know from former times don't help to solve the problem. It's a terrible reaction from Hungary to build such a fence. And it only means to transfer a problem to other countries, to the neighboring countries.
There are plenty of countries around Europe, we've just seen it. I was looking at the figure for Slovakia. I'm not sure if this is reliable, but it said that only 14 refugees have been taken in by Slovakia compared to the huge numbers we've been talking about in Germany.
They have to be Christian or something as well.
They have to be Christian. They're being very, very, very selective about it. If we have countries around Europe saying, effectively, we do not care, how are we going to get a common European policy on the refugee question?
We need to sit at a table and really come to a solution, but not in this strict mathematical matter. It is a difference whether there are countries like Latvia or Estonia, they have already 30 or 40% population not from their original ethnicity like Russians. There we should have more understanding. Slovakia, Hungary.
So there has to be an ethnicity factor in the equation.
I think we should just be politically a little bit flexible. And there are countries which can afford to take more people in, like Germany, with a growing economy that's easier than in a country with a stuttering economy like Greece. So we should be a little bit flexible. But of course, there has to be much more pressure for a common European solution. And my point from the beginning, it shouldn't be a big government approach. We should try to find out where do those people come from? Do they have already relatives, friends somewhere in the EU? And then you should send them there in order that private people do the integration work more than a government. And of course, you can count these people who are taken into national quotas, and then those who have no relatives and no point where to go, those you can send to other places. But we should really try to use the private willingness to help and to integrate people. It's not an administrative and government responsibility in the first place.
Erik, you've been observing very closely the good Germans and the bad Germans at work in both cases. When has a point been reached, possibly? The Berlin mayor talked about it this week, a tipping point, possibly, a point where the mood changes. When could there be a point where good Germans would become bad Germans?
It's a good question, a tough question. I think one of the big problems we're talking about now is the unfairness in the EU, that some countries like Germany and Sweden are taking in a large number. Other countries in Eastern Europe and Britain are taking in next to none, and that's a problem. It's a bit like the Eurozone crisis. It reminds me of the Eurozone crisis. Where's the leadership? It takes forever for some leadership. Germany could be a great leader in this issue. Germany has morally doing a fantastic job.
It's got the moral high ground at this point in time, that's
for sure.
You
would think that Germany would try to be a little more effective in getting France on board or getting Britain to take a bit more. The EU just is a mess, really, with their policy on the refugees. They could barely agree to allow 40,000 in for the next 2 years. What is 40,000 when 800,000 are coming to Germany alone? So it's a bit of a joke seeing the way the EU is just dropping the ball again, like they did for the first 4 years of the Eurozone crisis, and it just got worse. One can only hope that the EU will get its act together a little faster with hopefully some more German leadership on the refugee crisis before countries start pointing the finger at each other and before the mood does turn.
I'd just like to remind all of us, not just you guys, but myself, the official figure, as far as I can tell, is 1,867 people lost their lives trying to get across the Mediterranean in the first half of this year, from January to June. The question at the top of the show was, do we care enough? And, if you were pedantic, you'd be asking, who are the we? The we, let's take it to be the Germans, us. I'd like to ask each of you, do you, and do you, and do you, and do I, do we care enough?
Yes, I think we do.
How do you manifest it? How does that manifest it?
We try to understand why people are coming, and we are opening doors privately and also in a public discussion. In that way, we are doing a lot and trying to understand why these people are coming, giving them a helping hand. But we can't do it for everybody, and there are also reasons that we should send back those who are taking places which are much more necessary for others.
Katarzyna.
Germany does enough in comparison to other countries, and you are right, it's not possible to solve the problem alone. And this is why European solidarity is needed in order to find a solution, in order to make all participating but profit from the problem.
Oh, poor Erik has now got two questions. The question is, are the Germans doing enough? And is there such a thing as European solidarity these days?
Unfortunately, very little of it. I mean, I think in general, people in Germany do care a lot. But you think if this had been an earthquake, there'd be a lot of solidarity immediately, and there isn't a lot of solidarity right now. And this is a crisis happening.
I mean, in Germany, we tend to send large amounts of money to a place that has been hit by a natural catastrophe. Greece has been hit by refugees arriving in Kos, very little arriving. OK, we've got to break it off there. Time is running out. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought. Thank you to all three guests. If you've enjoyed the show as much as I have, come back next week and do get in touch via Facebook, Twitter, by mail, or send a letter. Put a stamp on it and send it to me. I'd love it. Bye-bye for now. Tschüss.